As we often talk about, IP Fabric is the key part to your operational ecosystem. And we work with many technical alliance partners in order to bring you that integration and the improvements to your operations. Our next partner that we're talking to today is another one of those key operators in the ecosystem. Now, network automation, as we know, brings plenty of benefits to your operations. Improved efficiency, scale, and accuracy. But it has its challenges as well. How to really prove that that automation is giving you the capabilities that you're looking for. How to get trust and confidence in the process so that you know that you're not going to cause more problems than you solve. Now, Rich Martin is here with me today from Itential, who's going to dig a little bit more into just how Itential and IP Fabric can work together to improve your network automation. Hi, Rich.
Hey, Daren, it's good to see you, and thank you for this session. I'm really excited to introduce Itential. We have a network automation platform. At Itential, we're really focused on helping the network engineer get into automation, because that's one of the challenges of automation in the networking field is there's a high skills gap for network engineers who are already tasked with managing networks to now write code to automate all of these tasks. So what really sets us apart, if I can just pick three things and just briefly discuss them here, is number one, we want to make it really, really easy for network teams to create these automations. So where we start is with a visual canvas, right? This is a low code drag and drop methodology to create an automation. So from there, we want to make sure that we take a look at the entire network and allow automation across it. If you really, Daren, if we think about it, what does the network look like today? It's a whole lot different than it was 5 years ago, right? We think routers and switches, but really it's expanded way beyond that. It's expanded into physical and virtual devices, even cloud native network services. And so automation to that point needs to really span the entire ecosystem of the network itself. So our platform makes it easy to automate across the entire network. So with that, we support both CLI and API. Again, if we want to call it legacy network devices like routers, switches that are driven by CLI, that's not going away anytime soon. But what we've also seen is now a lot of modern networking solutions that are controller driven, like SD-WAN, or even cloud native that have dashboards and consoles. That needs to be automated too. And when we think about activating a service or an application across the network, it really hits many of these domains. So we really at Itential want to make it easy to integrate all of these networking domains across that entire network. So what you have yesterday, what you have today, and what you have tomorrow is something that we want to enable network engineers to automate across. Along with that, kind of the second point that I think that really sets us apart at Itential is our API first approach in our platform that allows us to easily and quickly integrate everything in your IT ecosystem. So if you think about the process of automation, as a networking team starts down that journey of network automation, they usually start with a very task-focused mentality. You've been a network engineer, I've been a network engineer in our past lives, and I think about all of the repetitive manual tasks that I think, if I had a script that could do this, where I could, put some input into the script on the command line, run the script. I'm doing this so many times a day. This would certainly save me a lot of time. And that's where a lot of networking teams start. And that's great. We want to actually enable them to not only keep those scripts to integrate them into our system, but we also want to provide a way to integrate all those other systems that they're using on a day-to-day basis that are really more about the process and not necessarily about the network. Because where it starts with the networking task, it quickly builds out if you can enable network teams to build out automations and not limit them. They don't have a skills gap that necessarily stops them to continue automating. So it's not about automating just between network domains, my data center, my SD-WAN, but it's also about every time I have to do a network change, I have to do something like open a ticket in my ITSM, that could be ServiceNow, or I might have to consult a source of truth for my IP addresses. or the next available interface. That could be netbox or info blocks. And then some of that process also goes into, it would be nice to be able to notify the network operations team before I make a change, or to notify the network engineering team that I'm making the change and here's the change I'm making. So where network engineers start automating is the task, but really where it needs to end up is automating all of these different systems in one workflow. And that's what we do. We make it very easy to integrate those systems into our platform by consuming APIs. So if you look at most of the systems that I talked about today, those IT systems, they have published APIs, usually Open API Swagger Stack or a Postman collection. And you can as a customer, we allow our customers to literally take those files, bring them into our system, drop them in, and create an adapter that allows now all of the API tasks to be able to be used in that visual canvas as drag and drop elements. And that's what becomes very, very powerful in our platform. And along with that is the ability to integrate systems like IP Fabric, right? So like you said earlier, the whole point, and we believe at Itential, we're in the trust and confidence game. We want to make sure that every automation is built with a sense of being able to trust and verify everything that was done. And so, because just like we said, if you can't trust that your automation is going to work and that it could cause more trouble than solves, then network teams will never use it. And that goes against the whole concept and philosophy of automation. So being able to integrate systems like IP Fabric are incredible for us because it helps bolster that ability for network teams to understand what's really going on in the network before and then after a change. And with that, the third point is we make it easy for network engineers themselves to get started day one, creating these pre-check and post-check conditions. And what I mean by that, this is in the mind of a network engineer, this is basically almost subconscious, right? If I have to make a change to a network device, let's say through the CLI, I'm going to create a new interface on a network device. What are the conditions before I make that change? Does that network interface already exist? If it does, maybe I shouldn't make that change. I need to investigate that further and figure out why. But if it doesn't, if it doesn't exist and everything else looks good, that's a process now that leads me into the ability to confidently make the change. Once I make the change, you need a post-check process. Again, this could be subconscious to most network engineers. So what was it that I just created? I created an interface. Is it up? Can I ping it? Can something on the outside ping it? Right? All of these things are part of that process. So now that I've made the change, how do we make sure that the change has been created correctly and it hasn't affected anything else on the network? And that's really where we have to build that trust and assurance and confidence. And that's where we make it easy for the network teams to build that themselves and then leverage tools like IP Fabric to help them increase that ability to ensure that any changes made were correct.
So let me just clear that up for myself there, Rich. What you're talking about is that you're creating a workflow, a series of tasks that involve the network, but also involve other systems that sit around the network in that operational space. So, for example, if you've got a situation where you're carrying out a change, you've all the prep to do by going, as you say, to fetch IP address information, to fetch interface information, to fetch all those other things. You can build that into the workflow in Itential so that you don't have to manually do that yourself, so that it brings that data into the process. And then as you're carrying out that automated process, so you can do the checks in the same automated fashion in potentially other platforms, other systems. For example, you could execute the change, run a refresh on the snapshot and IP Fabric, check the intent rules and everything that are verified by IP Fabric that things are behaving as you expect, then pass that information back into the workflow in Itential in order to continue to complete update the ticket in ServiceNow or whatever it needs to be so you can log the outcome as well.
Yeah, that's precisely right. And you can even start simple. You can start with a single task on the canvas to make a single network change. Like I said, the example could be update an interface or, configure an interface. Implement step 2 could be implement your pre-check and post-check processes. that would include integration with IP Fabric, again, to assure that before the change is made, what the network looked like. Now that the change has been made, what does the network look like? Is everything running and operating as expected? And then, as a third step, because I want to logically progress this, especially for network engineers, right? Trying to just get started in building automations. Next step is, okay, how do we integrate that ServiceNow process into it so that I can maybe open a ticket, or at the very least at every stage before I make a network change, after I make a network change, and it could be multiple network changes across multiple domains, that we're updating the ticket information, right? The work notes, perhaps, with all of the latest information in real time. And then again, that next layer, because of our ability to integrate, where is that information coming from that you're defining that interface, right? Is that coming from a source of truth? Then let's integrate that into it. So now there's even less information that you have to manually put into the workflow itself. And then being able to add things like Slack or MS Teams integration for real-time updates for the team. Like, that is a logical progression that we've worked with our customers to create. Even in our proof of concept, we'll walk customers through them creating these things themselves, because the whole point is you should be able to do this. We want to empower you guys to do this as the networking team.
Yeah, I guess so. What you're doing is you're taking the emphasis away from actually doing the automation, creating the capability to go and do those things, and more the emphasis is shifted to what's the workflow look like? How does that process actually get you from the point where you don't have that change implemented to the point where you've got trust and confidence in the fact that change has been implemented?
That's right. That's right. Exactly right. Fully documented, and ensuring that before and after the change is made, everything is spot on. So that's absolutely great.
I guess one of the other things that you can do is to trigger that change dynamically and automatically as well, right? So I'm thinking of a scenario where, for example, in IP Fabric, you might run a snapshot and use a webhook from IP Fabric once that snapshot's completed to go and actually trigger an activity in Itential to go and use the data that's been collected in that snapshot to go and do something interesting again.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of even a more advanced step. So once network teams are familiar and building automations, leveraging them in kind of these event-driven closed loop automations is something they totally can do in our platform. They can publish an automation either so that it can be run in a self-service catalog, or, like you said, it can be run in response to an external event that is called in order to make a change, maybe automatic remediation, that kind of thing, or updating, or making a decision as to what to do. Sometimes you want to remediate the source of truth. Sometimes you want to remediate the network. Sometimes you want to ask a human being what to do next. And all of those things, that kind of flexibility is we want to put that in the hands of the networking team, because that's where the intelligence to understand what's really going on in the network, and under certain conditions we ought to do this. Under certain conditions we ought to do this, and under other conditions maybe we need to just take a look at it a little bit closer and have human eyes look at it.
I was going to say do nothing, right?
So that's right.
That example of the source of truth one is a great one, and one that we see all the time with our
correct. So, yeah, and go ahead.
No, please.
I was going to say, this is something that you and I have discussed previously, and this is something that we want to talk about now for sure, because it does come up so often, especially as customers invest in some sort of source of truth or multiple sources of truth, and invest in IP Fabric for network assurance. Ultimately, as best as as we want it to be, there's going to be some discrepancy between the source of truth and the network, whether that's because somebody made a manual change, right, and then kind of went outside the process, because not everything is going to necessarily be automated so that it can go through this documentation and process. But there are opportunities for networking, to go, out of sync with the source of truth. I'm sure there's a couple of other examples to that as well that we've discussed in the past.
Sure. I think the key point there, I suppose, well, there's a couple for me. One is that a source of truth doesn't have to be a source of truth. It could be multiple, right? So you've got that ability to bring data in and check it against from multiple sources. So that one is super important for me. For example, if you want to validate that actually these IP addresses are the ones that are in use on the network, because I want to select another one that isn't in use, what you might do is go to the IPAM, drag that information in, go to IP Fabric and validate the IP addresses that are in use and say, actually, there's a group here that are actually in use that haven't been recorded. And so you might want to then just automatically go back and update the IPAM. Right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So, and that general idea, and I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So whether you have one source of truth, multiple sources of truth, the nice thing about that is with Itential, integrate all of that together, and then that can be used to real time. In real time, we federate that data that's in those sources of truth or your single source of truth, bring it into the system, and then because we also integrate with IP Fabric, we can take a look at what both sides of this equation look like, and are they the same? So you might have your source of truth could be Netbox saying, I say this about the network. And then, but in reality, IP Fabric does a snapshot and says, but the network looks like this. So I say this about the network. At what point how do you resolve this conflict? Right? So you need an automated approach to doing this, ideally. Otherwise, we might be creating even more backlog for a network team that's already backlogged to begin with. And so that's so everything we talked about a little bit earlier about what makes Itential unique and valuable in this case is the ability to integrate all of that, the ability to all of your sources of truth, IP Fabric, all your network systems, and their ability to allow networking teams to build the workflow with that intelligence, right? Because they're ultimately the ones that can make those kinds of decisions. So now we're putting the ability to create a flexible automation in their hands to say, you know what, under certain circumstances, when the source of truth says, like for instance, a network interface ought to say this, but then IP Fabric says, but it doesn't say that at all. Maybe it doesn't have a description or port description on it. Well, then we should probably change the network to sync and fit what the definition of that source of truth has. So we can make that change, right? At Itential, we can make that change based off of the automation that the network team creates. The network team may also say, you know what? The network says this IP address is in use on this interface, but the source of truth says it should be something different. In that case, what do you do? If that's an operational interface, do you update the operational interface to reflect the source of truth? As a networking person, I would say, no, could be in use. As a networking person, I would say, let's maybe in certain cases, maybe we pull some other data out. Maybe we should look at some operational things to see what's going on. Maybe we update the source of truth now to sync with what the network is going on. And maybe that's a use case for like somebody deploying some new device in the network that they were supposed to deploy, but maybe they didn't follow a process. And so it hasn't been updated in the source of truth, right? So there are going to be times where your automation has to be flexible enough to go, okay, we need to update the source of truth to match the network. Again, that's a decision. Ultimately, that intelligent decision needs to be made by a human and then referenced and created and referenced in an automation. And that's what we do. That's what we do. We want to unlock that potential.
I find this one really interesting because, of course, what you're straying into here is the grey areas, right? Of saying, well, look, there's no definitive answer, yes or no. What happens if you've got a maybe? Well, in a normal classic network automation scenario, you don't have maybes. You have yeses and you have nos, and you have to deliver on those. But what you've got, I suppose, the flexibility of the automation in Itential is you can actually feed out to a maybe sort of scenario where you can create a ticket in ServiceNow, let's say, for someone to go and check it manually and actually go and do that thing. So you're integrating both normal operational process with the automation. And that's the difference for me, I think, is this ability to take the assurance, to take the automation, to bring them together with the processes that people are already familiar with to deliver on the efficiency and the trust.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. So in that third case, it's the great maybe, right? And maybe it's because we've never seen anything like this before necessarily, and there's some new data that we need to consider. And that that, like you said, that could open a new ticket in ServiceNow within the automation, identify the right group that needs to go to. And the beauty of that is now the human being on the networking team can take a look at that and go, oh, here's a new case this is how to resolve that case. And now let's build that into the automation so that subsequent cases that match that criteria can now be automatically remediated. So now we can create a set of cases where we have the trust and confidence to automatically remediate the source of truth. We have a set of criteria that says we can automatically remediate the network under these circumstances. And then we have a set of criteria that says, let's go to that network engineering team, let them make that decision. And then ideally, because they're enabled to update the automation themselves, they can quickly go in and create that new case. And that's really, if you think about it, that's how you really build robust automation. You have to have connectivity to this. You have to have the ability for the networking teams to express that knowledge and experience into the automation, and then for them directly to be able to go to use the tools for trust and confidence, and then go back and iterate over that automation to make it better and better. If you're doing that, now you're really reaping the benefits of not just the networking automation side of it, but all of the ServiceNow integration with source of truth, and then being able to go back in and iterate and make your automations even better, saving more time, saving less effort, and really now focusing on the things that a human really needs to look at, really just focusing on those specific things. And the things that can be automated because we understand those cases are done automatically, and you're updated as to when those happen. So you still have visibility and everything is fully documented, but you don't have to actually do the work. You can just kind of go, okay, yes, that's something that happens, that occurs. We have an automation that covers it. Here's the full documentation of the change that we got from Itential, from IP Fabric, from the source of truth. All of that's in a ServiceNow ticket. You review it, you go, this looks good, and we saved the networking team lots of time and lots of effort doing things that are normally just create backlog.
It strikes me, it's interesting. We have a story, Rich, the journey to the self-driving network. It's a really important part of where we believe network operations is going. And it strikes me that by coupling that automation, that flow of tasks through Itential with the assurance from IP Fabric, you're actually reaching a point where a lot of the issues, we won't say all of them, but a lot of them can be self-healed, right? You can actually deal with those things automatically. So that the only things that get surfaced to a human are the things that really need the human's attention. And that certainly feels like a big step towards that self-driving network.
Yeah, precisely right. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
So Rich, obviously, we're working together a lot at the moment. We've got some exciting stuff coming up. Where can people find more about, first Itential and then about the work that we're doing together?
Well, certainly you could visit our website at itential.com, where we have lots of webinars, videos, documentation, use cases. We have an entire pre-built library. So one of the things I didn't hit on was, in order to make automation easier, we provide lots of automation already. So for top use cases, we have lots of automations there that a customer could immediately download into the platform and start using with very little effort, And so going there is a great resource. In fact, you'll find very specific things that we've talked about here implemented in a step-by-step basis in some of our webinars and demos. We'll also be at Cisco Live, along with IP Fabric as well, which is our booths are right across the way from each other. And we'll be demoing, we'll be jointly demoing an IP Fabric and Itential use case where we do pretty much everything we talked about today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's been really great working with you guys in developing these demo use cases, because of the way it's certainly opened our eyes to see what the capability of Itential is, and hopefully vice versa. But sure, I mean, the opportunities for bringing those two platforms together, I think, are massive, and I'm hoping that when we get to Cisco Live, we're able to show everybody just how well things work. Rich, I'm going to thank you very much for your time and joining us today. Thank you for this. It'd be looking forward to seeing you in Vegas, my friend.
Yeah, thank you very much.